Hello children, I am your teleteacher for today, Dr. Mrs. Pallavi Patnaik, and today we will be discussing a very interesting chapter which is Village Judge. The chapter will be discussed in two specific parts and I hope all of you have your notebooks and pencils out so that you can note whatever important points I am discussing in this particular segment. Let me tell you, this segment comprises of the summary as well as other important questions that are important from your examination point of view. So, children, let's begin. Now, look at the summary. Please very carefully pay attention to the summary. The story starts with a man called Juman Sheikh. Juman Sheikh is friends with another person known as Algu Chaudhary. They resided in the same village. Now, this Juman Sheikh, he had an old aunt. This aunt was a wealthy lady. She had some kind of property with her, and what this Juman Sheikh wanted was to somehow make the aunt sign over the entire property to Juman. But then the aunt needed a lot of convincing. In the end, Juman took over her property, which the aunt gave to him willingly in the hope that Juman would take care of her. But Juman was a very crooked man in the sense that he did not give auntie a single penny for her living. Now, what happens next? Now, this lady, she was a very righteous lady. Now, she did not want to depend on anybody in particular. But since Juman was her only nephew, she thought that if at all she helped Juman in some way, Juman would take care of her. But look at Juman, this crooked fellow, he did not do anything for the old lady. So, what the old lady had to do? She had to run from pillar to post, from one village to another with a stick in her old hands and then persuading people to help her. But look how selfish the world has become. Nobody helped the old lady. Finally, she landed up at Algu Chaudhary's house and persuaded Algu Chaudhary that please help me convene a panchayat and solve my issue. Algu was the best friend of Juman, so he did not want to get involved in such affairs. But aunt somehow convinced him that Algu, you should not sacrifice your conscience for the sake of friendship, because whatever is decided in the punch is said to be coming out straight from the mouth of God. So, you should be impartial. And the punch then decided to meet one fine day under a big tree. Now, aunt was there, Juman was there, Algu was there, and Algu was selected as the judge to preside over the matter. What Algu said was, he started asking Juman a lot of questions about auntie's property. In the end, Algu was satisfied that the old lady was telling the truth, and he in fact decided under that tree that auntie has to receive a particular sum or a particular amount from Juman so that she can reside comfortably, because she had signed her entire property in Juman's name. And if Juman did not do that, then he has to return all the property back to auntie. And this made Juman very angry. He had thought that Algu will always decide in his favor, but that did not happen. Now, what happened next? Juman never expected such a judgment. Algu and Juman, they did not even talk to one another for a few days. Now, Juman was thinking how he would take revenge on Algu. But he could not think of proper ideas, but yet in his mind he was scheming, how should I take revenge? What happened in the meanwhile? One of the bullocks that belonged to Algu, it died. Juman became very happy. On the other hand, Algu began suspecting that probably Juman had poisoned that bullock. Now, Algu was a dealer. What happened? He took another bullock from Samjhu Sahu. Now, this Samjhu Sahu also was a dealer who also drove a small cart to the town. In the town, he sold different kinds of merchandise. So, what Algu said, since one of his bullock had died and earlier he had made purchases from Samjhu, he said, please take away my bullock and in a month's time you can pay up the entire amount of the bullock. and you can use the bullock for your purposes. Samju agreed to this because he wanted to make trips to the city. And what he did not give adequate food and water to the bullock. He made the bullock work very, very, very hard. What happened as a result? The bullock, after making 3 to 4 trips without food and water, died on the spot. And what happened? The bullock on the 4th trip fell down ill, like I told you. He could not tolerate that hard work without adequate food and water. But Samju Sahu also was a very wicked man. When Algu Chaudhary went to Samju Sahu and said, "You killed my bullock. You did not provide him with proper nutrition. Now pay me my money." He flatly refused. Samju Sahu flatly refused. And what was to be done then? He also decided that I will convene a panch. Now, the panchayat in this case met under the same tree again, and Juman was asked whom he would want to choose as a judge. In the meanwhile, it was decided, and Juman was asked whether he would be the judge himself. In the meanwhile, it was decided that whatever has been told by the panchayat or whatever is decided by the panchayat, that decision will be accepted by one and all. Now Juman, it was his chance to take revenge from his friend Algu, but he also had a conscience. He started listening to the matter very clearly, and after he listened to the entire matter, he said it was Samju Sahu who was at fault, and that Samju Sahu should pay the entire amount back. To whom? To Algu Chaudhary, because it was the bullock who had died because of Samju Sahu's negligence. Now Algu Chaudhary and Juman, they both thought in their own minds that really the voice of the panch is the voice of God. Ultimately, God decides for the best of each human being, and then they understood the entire matter and they embraced one another. Now, this was the summary of the entire story, children. I hope you have understood the story well. Now, what we will do is we will discuss some important questions that are related to your examination. If you want, you can note them down in your copies. So, please pay attention. Look at the first question. Who are the main characters in the story? The main characters, who are the main characters, children? They are Samju Sheikh, Juman Sheikh, Samju Sahu, his old aunt, and Algu Chaudhary. Okay? Now, how did Juman and his wife treat the old aunt when she had her property? When Juman's aunt transferred all of her property to Juman and his wife, then suddenly both the husband and wife started treating the old lady very harshly. They did not care for her and they did not treat her adequately as she was being treated before. Now, why did their sudden behavior suddenly change? Why was there a sudden change of behavior? Juman and his wife, they were very greedy people, and what they wanted was auntie's property. They treated her well before she transferred her property in Juman's name, but their behavior suddenly changed and they started to treat her differently after they had accomplished the goal of taking away her property from her. Okay? Now, next question, what did auntie decide to do and what did she finally do? Now, what did this old lady do? The aunt could not stand the ill treatment of her nephew and his wife, and she decided to go to the panchayat and then resolve her problems. She finally went to Juman's best friend. Who was he? Algu Chaudhary. Now, next. Algu was not ready to help Juman's aunt. How do you think he felt after she had left? We know that Algu Chaudhary and Juman Sheikh were best of friends. So, naturally, Juman's aunt, when she went to Algu Chaudhary, she was thinking of receiving help from him, but Algu was not in a mood. So, how should we answer this question? Juman's aunt's words, they had a deep effect on Algu's heart, and he felt sad and thought over the matter once more very sincerely and mindfully. Now, what was the next question that we have? Who was selected as the main judge? Who was selected as the main judge here? Algu Chaudhary. Algu Chaudhary was selected as the main judge. Why? Because he had been told about the entire matter by Juman's aunt, and since he was also a friend of Juman, this person was ultimately selected as the judge.
सुंदरगढ़ ठारू कलाहांडी दक्षिण पश्चिम ओडिशा आकाशरे नुआ किरणर झलक खंडमंडल झलसी उठुछि इशारा करुछि विकास धारारे प्रवाहित ओडिशा को बिजू एक्सप्रेस वे ओडिशार प्रिय मुख्यमंत्री श्री नवीन पट्टनायकଙ୍କ नेतृत्व और दूरदर्शितार आउ एक झलक 5टी शासनतंत्र आधार में सुंदरगढ़ जिल्लारू कलाहांडी जिल्ला पर्यंत 546 किलोमीटर बिजू एक्सप्रेस वे 6टी जिल्ला को सड़क मार्ग रे जोड़िछि। संपूर्ण बिजू एक्सप्रेस वे 4 लेन विशिष्ट होइथिबा कारणରୁ गमनागमन एबे होइछि आहुरी सुविधाजनक।
आमर छुआ पिला पढ़ी जीवा के भी बहुत असुविधा रे पड़ुथिले एबे निके 5 मिनिट रे भी छुआ माने पले जोछन 2
घंटा 3 घंटा लागुथला नुआपड़ा पहुंचबा लागि हॉस्पिटल आमे आधा घंटा भीतर पहुंची परसु।
हमर जेन ई बिजू एक्सप्रेस रास्ता बनला व्यावसायिक इतिर बहुत लाभ हैला और अर्थनैतिक भी बहुत डेवलप कला।
बिजू एक्सप्रेस वे केवल सुगमता आनी देछि ता नुह व्यवसाय शिल्प एवं साधारण गमनागमन रे आनिछि वैप्लविक परिवर्तन। पड़ोसी राज्य छत्तीसगढ़ और झारखंड सह जोगाजोगर मार्ग प्रशस्त करने सह राज्य अर्थनीति को आहुरी सुदृढ़ करुछि बिजू एक्सप्रेस वे। सड़क पार्श्वरे थिबा स्वतंत्र शिल्पांचल पथप्रांत सुविधा केन्द्र पर्यटन केन्द्र प्रभृति राज्य अभिवृद्धि रे नेउछि सक्रिय अंश। प्रिय मुख्यमंत्री श्री नवीन पट्टनायकଙ୍କର जनमंगलकारी योजना समूह मध्यरु अनन्य बिजू एक्सप्रेस वे ओडिशार विकास पर्व रे निर्वाह करुछि गुरुत्वपूर्ण भूमिका।
Now children, we learned about so many things that were discussed in the chapter. Ultimately, we had come to the question who was selected as the main judge. The main judge, as we know, was Algu Chaudhary. Algu Chaudhary was the main judge. Now, we will go on to the next question, which is, now, Algu was not ready to join the punch. Why did he change his mind in between? Algu changed his mind after auntie made him realize. What did auntie made him realize? That God speaks through the punch and his decision is considered to be just. Nowadays children, you don't see a lot of panchayat meetings taking place, but in ancient India the punch was the main deciding body. What it did was it heard to both the parties carefully, and after listening to the parties they made a very just decision. That is why the gods were believed to be speaking through the mouths of the punch members, okay, or the punch elders, and their decision was always considered to be final. Next, what was the judgment? Did you expect this judgment? What was the judgment? What had we learnt in the summary? The judgment was made that there should be a monthly allowance to the aunt. What is a monthly allowance? A monthly payment, okay. So, a monthly allowance should be made to the aunt, and if it is not agreed, then the property should be returned to auntie. And of course, all of you would agree with this kind of judgment, isn't it? If the lady had signed over all her property in her nephew's name, then the nephew and his wife were expected to take proper care of her, and if they did not do that, it is only just that they should return auntie's property back to her. Now, do you think Juman and Algu will continue to be friends now? Naturally, if two friends quarrel, the friendship becomes somewhat bitter, you know. So, most people will think that Juman and Algu will not continue to be friends once Algu Chaudhary has given a strong decision against Juman. Okay. Now, what happened to the relationship between Juman and Algu after the judgment? We saw that auntie found Algu Chaudhary, she requested Algu Chaudhary, but what happened when Algu Chaudhary became the judge and decided in auntie's favor? What happened between Juman and Algu? Let's see. The judgment made between Juman and Algu made Juman very angry, okay, as he never expected such a thing from his close friend. Both Juman and Algu stopped talking to each other and the friendship came to a halt. Naturally, when even in class, when both two friends quarrel, when they sit close to one another, what do you see? In some cases, they stop talking to one another. So, this is what happened with Juman and Algu. They broke their friendship and they stopped talking to each other. Now, one of Algu's bullocks died. What did Juman say and what did Algu think? This is another important question. Juman said that it was the punishment for Algu's deception that made the bullock die. Algu thought that it was Juman who had poisoned his bullock. Naturally, both Algu and Juman were at loggerheads with each other. Juman and Algu were not speaking to one another. It was only natural of Juman to think that probably it was his deception of the friend, that probably because it was the deception of his friend that made Algu's bullock die. And Algu on the other hand started suspecting Juman. He felt that probably Juman had come sometime and poisoned his bullock to take revenge. Now, what was the next question we have? A new character is introduced. Who is the person? Now, as we read through this story, we see another character emerges. Who is this character? The character's name is Samjhu Sahu. And what did Samjhu Sahu do? He used to drive an ekka to town. What is an ekka? An ekka is a sort of a cart. So, Samjhu Sahu is the new character who has been introduced in the story. And what does this Samjhu Sahu do? Samjhu Sahu is a merchant who drives an ekka to the town. Why did Samjhu want to buy the single bullock of Algu? Did he pay Algu for the bullock? What did he promise? Now look at the questions, children. These questions are all connected to one another. You may get this as a single question or you may be getting it in a continuous form. But pay attention to the answer. How the answer is given, you have to pay attention to it. So, what happened? What happens next? Let's see. He brought the single bullock because with the help of it, Samjhu would make 3 trips a day easily and earn more money. He didn't pay for the bullock immediately. He promised Algu that he would pay off the price in a month's time. So, what the Samjhu Sahu did? He was a very clever fellow. He said, look Algu, I cannot pay you the entire amount immediately. What I will do is utilize your bullock for taking trips to town and then when I have enough money in a month's time, pay it back to you. Now, how did Sahuji treat the bullock? What happened to it? Now, look at the answer carefully. Sahuji did not take proper care of the bullock. He overloaded him with a lot of work. He didn't even give him water or food. He just wanted to make money from the poor animal. That is very bad. On one day, he put a double load on it during the 4th trip, okay, which made the animal dead tired. And he then whipped it so hard with cruelty that it fell down and died. So, children, this is something very pathetic. We should never treat animals this way. Even though we have pets, even though we have domestic animals, but they should not be treated with such cruelty. But what this wicked fellow Samjhu Sahu did, he started beating the bullock. He did not give it food and water. He started overworking the bullock and he started whipping it so hard that out of sheer exhaustion, the bullock fell down dead. Okay, hungry and tired, the bullock fell down dead. Very pathetic. Now what do you think will happen in the story next? I think what will happen? The matter will go to the Sarpanch. In most cases we see, it has been found that the matter is often referred to the Sarpanch in the olden days. So, in this matter also, since it is a village, since the story is taking place in a rural setting, I think the matter will also be referred to the village Sarpanch. Now, Sahuji had not paid Algu for the bullock. When Algu asked for the money, did Sahuji pay him? Why or why not? Sahuji is the most wicked character in the story, children. Why? What did he do? Let's see. Sahuji did not pay Algu any money. He argued saying that Algu gave him a dying bullock. Now look at the cleverness of Sahuji. He did not want to pay money. So what he did? He devised a plan. He wanted to trick Algu. So what he did was, he said, I will not pay you any money for the bullock because you already gave me a bullock that was old, diseased and dying. So Sahuji did not pay any money, saying that Algu Chaudhary had given him a dead, dying and a diseased bullock. Okay. Now a punch was called again. Who was the judge this time? Very interesting this is. In Juman's case, Algu was the judge. Now let's see what happens in Algu's case. This time the judge was none other than his best friend Juman Sheikh. Now what was the decision of the punch? What happened? What happened when Algu Chaudhary became the punch and what did he decide? Now the decision taken by Samjhu to make Algu, to make Juman the judge of Algu's case was, it tended to be a sort of a revenge, but it backfired. What happened was, the decision taken by the punch was that Samjhu ought to pay the full price of the bullock. Now since Samjhu was known to be a wicked merchant, since Samjhu was known to drive the bullock, causing him to exhaust and die, Punch decided that Samjhu, it is you who have to pay the amount back to Algu. Everyone hearing the judgment said, this is the work of God. Why? Children, this question is very important. This is often asked in your examinations. What should be the answer? Through the punch, there was a just decision which makes people believe in justice. When the judgment was made in favor of Algu, everybody believed that God had done justice. So what happened? It was then said that it is the mouth or the words of God that speaks through the punch. And in this case, it was said that an appropriate decision was made. Everybody should have a conscience, children, and they should listen to the voice of conscience. The voice of conscience is the voice of God, which never lies. Now, there were two unexpected judgments in the story that surprised you more. Why? And which character did you like best? Now, the judgment made by Juman was the most unexpected one. Why? Because of the fact that he was not on good terms with Algu. This is very surprising. It was surprising that he took the decision in favor of his old friend. Juman's aunt had in fact rightly said that everybody was equal before the punch. And in my view, which character should be liked best? The character of Juman's aunt. I feel the character of Juman's aunt should be liked best. Why? She is an honest woman. She wished only for justice. This is very important, children. She wished only for justice. And she believed in the power of Panchayat, and ultimately she received justice. Now, short answer questions, these are the same that we have discussed. How did Juman's aunt and why did Juman's aunt want a punch? Now, Juman had an old aunt, as we know, who had a small piece of property. Everybody eyed her property. They were greedy. They wanted the property. Juman was so greedy that he and his wife treated her miserably after aunt had signed over the property, and that is why auntie, in order to get justice, wanted to be a punch that should be convened. And how did Juman Sant win the case? Juman Sant, she went to Algu Chaudhary as it was known. Algu Chaudhary was an honest man. The voice of auntie echoed in his heart and mind. Ultimately, he decided that if Juman is not taking care of her properly, Juman should either return the property or should pay auntie a monthly allowance. Now, why did Sahuji's bullock die? This is another important question. Sahuji, as we know, is a very wicked man. Sahuji treated the bullocks very miserably. He did not give them food and water. Ultimately, each bullock that he had died of exhaustion. And naturally, why was the second punch called? Because of Sahuji's irresponsible behavior, the second punch was called. Now children, these are the questions that we have all discussed in the earlier segment. I hope that you have understood the chapter well, and when we go to the next segment, we will be discussing more. Thank you.